And we are live. My name is Martin Oxley, and welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. Hello, Charles. How are you doing?
Hey, Martin. How you doing? Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Missing today is Steve. He had a little overlapping commitment, so it's just going to be the two of us to get started here, which I'm really excited about the show. I've loved this partner called SADA for many years, and I've always really appreciated their innovative work around Workspace. And so it would be super great to hear actually what they do to build solutions on Workspace. So I can't wait to get started on that. How about you, Martin? What do you think?
Well, I think in terms of our kind of the topics that we covered, I think we've looked at smaller scale people supporting Google Workspace. So I think it's going to be fascinating to hear how you do it on scale. And without going into too many spoilers, SADA are big and getting bigger. So I think that's definitely something interesting to hear about.
Absolutely. But before we bring them on, I was thinking about something, and I also had the pleasure of being on the Google Workspace update podcast the other day, and I was thinking to myself, how do people stay in tune with all the things that go on at Google? And I work at Google, and I struggle to stay up with all the things that we're releasing. Not just obviously in the developer space, but everything around Workspace overall. And so I figured I want to share a couple of assets to get folks started, and then maybe actually talk about a couple of the new things that are actually happening out there in the Workspace world that affects developers. So if you wouldn't mind popping my screen up, Martin, let's get started just real quickly before we bring on SADA. What's the best way to stay up to date, or what are some ways to simplify it, or some neat resources? And so obviously, if you're trying to stay up to date, probably the easiest one is the Google Workspace update blog. And so this blog comes out whenever there's something new. We publish something and we show you what's changed. You can see we have an article right here that just came out today. And it's a great place to learn. It pulls you off to other things. But one of the things that we noticed is that folks don't necessarily have time to check in with blogs or wait for posts to be up to date. So a few months ago, I actually produced a blog myself, ironically, that talked about a really neat way of pulling this information from blogs like this and actually make them available in things like Google Chat. So instead of you going to that blog article to find information, have that blog article come to you as soon as it's published. And so you can see I've got a neat little banner here that comes in on this Google Workspace updates chatbot. And the neat thing is I can go off and read more information if I'm interested. I can have conversations around this right inside of this space, inside of this room. So it's a neat way of keeping up to date. So just wanted to share. It's actually really easy to do. We got a blog out there that released back in August on this that I helped co-author with Justin Wexler. It'll tell you about how we built this and actually how Justin built it more namely, and a little bit about it. But probably the most important thing is you actually can take this and install it yourself. It actually runs on AppScript with an AppScript timer job, and then it uses a webhook to actually push it into any room of your choice, any space inside it. So it's a great way, again, instead of chasing information, having the information presented to you. Martin, if you have the short link on that, that'd be super awesome for folks to find this if they can't read that little screen and flash it up there. We'll hold that a second. Easy way to find that up there. So check that one out. The other thing I mentioned is was fortunate enough to actually get an invite to talk to the Google Workspace Recap folks. They do a great weekly podcast that breaks down everything that's going on, not just from what they see in the blog, but what they see around Workspace. The folks over there are Jesse Nolan and Steve Larson. They actually break it down, and what I love about it from a customer standpoint and a partner standpoint, they actually put a spin on the reality of it. So it's not really architecture, it's really them talking about how do these changes affect them. And so we've just actually did an episode with Steve Basil and myself this week. Went a little long, in an hour and a half.
Charles, how could that happen?
How could that happen? It was an excellent episode. So again, check it out. And then again, they do this weekly on everything developer and not developer. Well, actually not developer, admin topics, user. It's a great resource. And I just wanted to plug finally, I'm a big music fan. Since they post on Spotify, I finally got an episode up on Spotify. So that's fun. Okay, I'm going to switch over to developer for a second, though, Martin. One of the things that is a super neat way to stay in touch is this great resource called AppScript Pulse, specifically bringing developer topics together. I think you've done an amazing job getting this off the ground as the community lead on it, and now it's become kind of an essential way of staying up to date on specifically developer topics around Workspace. So another great resource. If you haven't seen that, pulse.appscript.info is a great thing. Okay, with that, couple items before we bring SADA on, I just want to talk about a couple of the really key changes that affect developers that all this content probably talked about this week, but just kind of bring it short right here. The first one is some changes to Google Workspace Marketplace. And some of these are neat for users, for admins, for folks taking these solutions down to actually discover apps better or to be more comfortable with the apps are. And some of them are little, like simply, what was the last update of this listing so they know, is this a well-maintained application? Is this offering something that's actively being changed or worked on? Also, developers can now announce if it's fee, free, freemium, paid with free features like we see here with this one. So a great way of knowing kind of what you're getting involved in before you get involved in it. So if you can test drive it before you actually have to buy, all those great things. Other neat things that they're doing besides kind of a fresher look are things like editor's choice. So again, we've got a criteria for putting some apps in here, but I can come through quickly and see, what are some of the newcomers that are interesting to look at? What are some of the business essentials? And it's a great way of actually having to go through instead of having to, just scroll through endless topics. You can see them there as well too. So some good changes there. There's a blog post out on that if you want to see more that talks about that. Again, you can use the bot to do that or check it out straight from the blog. The other one, which is kind of big, and the last thing I want to talk about here real quick, are the changes to menus in Google Sheets. And so these are kind of big changes because if you've written solutions in the past, the location of those have moved. And so your users will either need, reacquainting themselves with it, or perhaps even retraining, or even your documentation may need to change. And so something you want to take a check into. I think they're super helpful, but there's going to be a little bit of adjustment. Some of the things they've done, and actually let me just show you these here. I'll show you because I already have obviously a live version working internally. Let me take this and bring this menu over and put on the right. And then, let me get another window from this side. Give me a second while I pull the window in. And I'd be better learning all the hotkeys.
This is where I can't help you, Charles.
I'm an old Tyler here. Okay, make it a little bit smaller. Okay, and bring it down. So really at a glance, what you'll notice is the changes are slight, but they can be significant. So across the top, you can see on the left is what's new, on the right is what's old. So first of all, you'll notice, file, edit, view, insert, blah, 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 they're all the same. What you'll notice quickly, though, is tools no longer contains anything to do with extensibility. And we have a new menu item called extensions. So whereas before we had stuff under tools, stuff under add-ons, now instead of having add-ons separate and tools having things like script editor and macros, it's all under one location, which I think is awesome. I think it helps folks actually narrow down on what they're trying to work with. And the theme of this kind of reconfiguration is to make the menus easier to discover. You've noticed they've added more icons. There's been consolidation. There's been shortening. So for example, it doesn't scroll off the screen. You can see how the edit, for example, is a lot neater. Even things like the right menu. Look at the right menu. The current one is quite long. The future one is shorter, a little easier, a little more concise. And so a nice job overall. Again, not a huge change, but again, if you've got users out there and they're wondering, where did my favorite apps go? That you have as add-ons, they're now under the extensions. What do you think, Martin?
I think it looks great. So do you know what? So this is rolling out as we speak.
It is rolling out as we speak. Some folks already have it, and the blog tells you the details. I think it's supposed to be out by the end of the month to most folks. So it's in early preview and for early adopter domains. So that's that. So that look forward to that. Let's bring the SADA folks on and talk to them.
So we have Kelly Wright and Kevin Tuuri. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
So are you going to have to rewrite a lot of internal documentation around Google Sheets? Now, that's my first question.
I think one very recent customer might have that update. It needs some documentation updates, but yeah.
But before we go in too much detail in terms of what you do, can you just give an overview for those that aren't familiar with SADA in terms of what services SADA provides?
Yeah, definitely. So SADA is a Google Cloud partner, and we provide professional services around almost the entirety of the Google Cloud technology stack. So all of the different technology pillars on the GCP side, from infrastructure modernization to data analytics, and the workspace and collaboration services as well. So looking at workspace, AppSheet, AppScript, as well as other collaboration services that connect with Workspace. And
oh, okay. I thought.
So I will say the Workspace side has been, we started with Workspace back in 2007. We were one of the first Google Cloud partners to come in with delivering Gmail, and at the time, I believe it was probably called Google Apps for Business, all of those years ago. So we've definitely seen very large iterations of not just the naming, but also the products being updated. So thinking through all of the Gmail updates and how we deliver Workspace and train users on how to use Gmail and make it work for them.
So before we dive more into SADA, I'd love to actually have the folks meet you both. Now, Kelly, I know you've been at SADA almost since the very beginning. You're one of the originals, one of the original SADians, I believe is the terminology you use. How did you get to the position you are? Kind of what's your story?
Sure. So I have been at SADA for just shy of 9 years, so close to one of the originals. There's actually people on our team that have been here longer than I have been, so that's always fun. At SADA, I actually started on our support desk, so doing enterprise support. The fun story there is I walked into the office and they said, the person who sat in the chair that you are sitting in used to do Google support. So do you have a Google account? And I was like, yes, I have a Gmail account. And they were like, cool, you're going to do Gmail support. I was like, okay, awesome. So that's kind of how I got started on this trajectory with working on Google Cloud. Prior to Google coming in, SADA was more of a managed services provider, and that was the 100% of what we did. Worked through support, took on deployments, and ran through quite a few deployments during my tenure here. One of the large case studies is Colgate-Palmolive, so that was one that ran through, and we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that. Ran some good scripts there.
Yeah, it's awesome. You've seen every angle of the business, and you have the scars to prove it, which is awesome.
Right.
So Kevin, I understand you're a solution architect. Obviously, come from a development perspective. Well, a little bit about your background and your journey.
Yeah. So I've been at SADA now for 3 years. It's been amazing. Before that, I was actually in the Google ecosystem at another partner before that, kind of got my feet wet. Got into it, joined Kelly's team, actually as a deployment engineer. Initially, I think I built one too many tools, and ultimately Kelly said, we need to change this and move to a full-time developer position. So I took that on, and then just recently I've been working on transitioning to a full solutions architect role focused on still development work, but getting customers listed on the marketplace in GCP and then some AI offerings as well, like mainly Docs AI and things like that.
That's awesome. Hold that thought. We love to kind of talk about the Better Together cloud and workspace story, but do hold that thought for a little later on. I wanted to hit up a really kind of obviously weird question that I'm sure you get 1,000 times. What's a SADA? Where does that name come from?
The rumor is that it is the initials of all of the founders. Now, if I disappear tomorrow,
No
you
longer
know who to go talk to. We do get asked that a lot. So the rumor is it's the founders' initials.
So it's kind of like you're the ABBA of technology, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
For those who don't know, the ABBA is the first initial of the four folks in charge of it, or the founder of the band. Anyway, apologize if my dog is barking in the background there. You can hear that. The other question I wanted to ask is, you work, like you mentioned, Colgate, you work with customers of all shapes and sizes. What's the typical journey of a customer? And then to the juicy part, hopefully a segue, where does development fit into that? What's kind of that look like?
Yeah, so right now we're seeing a really interesting shift in where the projects and the life cycle of the projects are at. But a lot of our projects start with customers coming in to do their mail transformation. So they're getting off of Exchange or Office 365 and moving to Gmail, and they'll start opening up Drive, allowing people to use it. We are starting to see a lot more customers now in that ongoing adoption phase, which is really where the workspace development shines as well. So they're trying to recreate workflows for, either their sheets or integrations with their Office suites. So saying, we want to move fully to Drive, we want to get rid of these Office licenses. How can we maneuver some of these workflows? So sometimes it's just manual, like, hey, this is just a different process. Sometimes we have to bring in Kevin and his team to say, here is the workflow and how to build it around that. So.
Do you find it quite difficult sometimes in terms of, if you working with a customer that perhaps has been using Exchange or Microsoft Office for a long time, in terms of do they come to you already wanting to embrace Google Workspace, or are they more often coming to you saying, we've heard about Google Workspace, and the story starts there, or something different, entirely different?
So it depends on who you're talking to. So one of the large things our sales engineering team walks through and gets trained on is objection handling. So with moving off of an Office product, whether it's the Microsoft Suite or, even Mail and Teams, it's all about translating it over to the equivalent on the workspace side. So our adoption and change management team does have that job aid that says, if you want Gmail to look like how Outlook looked, here's how you can set that up. Because as a reality, like, some people really just want their side-by-side panel and they want to know where everything is. So that's just a small example there. And so some of that does come with, building out additional workflows to say, you have a macro for this already on the Excel side. So let's figure out how to translate that into an app script over here in workflows. So
the irony is, I recently moved from a Google Workspace to an Office organization, and I immediately tried to make my Outlook look like Gmail.
Yep. We have some former Saudians that have pinged me whenever Office 365 goes down or Teams goes down, and they're like, I miss this. It's awesome.
So the question I have for you, so Kelly, so that you kind of, evaluate their use cases, their workflows. One of the things I know that Google Workspace is great at is allowing folks natively to accomplish new ways of working without customizing anything. But then you come across an existing process, existing solutions built. Maybe it's been macros, maybe it's an old VB app or whatever. What's the process of kind of unwrapping that and figuring out, A, do we have to custom build this? B, how do we work with the customer to get that done? Because some folks are hesitant or leery of it or don't have the expertise. And sure, they can call Kevin, but at some point Kevin leaves the project. How does that conversation and that process go when you're like, hey, we're going to build something here. Here's what we're going to build.
Mm-hmm. So, Kevin, I might let you talk more to the ins and outs of it, but we do partner really closely with our change management team. So we will work on ongoing adoption projects, and part of that is generally kind of trying to pull that information out of customers. So these are customer or end users that now have been moved, and they say, hey, what are some of the workflows that you see that you want help recreating inside of Gmail? And so over the years, we've started adding in more developer-friendly engineers to transformation labs to say, hey, this transformation lab could turn into an app script discussion. And sometimes we actually use that as an opportunity to train on app script. Sometimes it turns into full-on prototyping a workflow, and that's kind of where those walk out of. I think, Kevin, you've seen a few more recently in terms of the transformation labs.
Yeah, the transformation labs have been great. Like Kelly said, we have the opportunity to put a developer in there and really see, as opposed to just taking, use like the VB script example, which is so common. You can look at it and just rewrite it. I mean, any sort of developer can do that, but really looking at it and finding out what are they accomplishing, where's the overlap or where's the change from Office to Google, and just kind of, everything doesn't need to be reinvented necessarily, but just looking for that opportunity to streamline it and just maybe use a better service for it. Maybe they were offloading something to a local file system and they say, we need to do this. And it's, hey, you're on Drive now. You have shared drives, you have this, that, and kind of go through that discovery process and see, make sure we're rebuilding it the right way and on the right solution. And is that app script or app sheet or, an ISV solution? We can really take them all.
How open or willing, and again, I don't know if it's a sliding scale or obviously the answer could be it depends, but how open and willing are folks doing custom development these days? Is it as much as they were? Is it less? Do you meet with objections, or some people like, whoa, we don't have the time to support this code? Like, where's the industry right now with that?
I will say, I think, especially in this part of custom dev, it is a little bit harder because it's shown as a citizen development item. So we actually thrive more on the transformation labs, building in smaller aspects into the deployment process, and then also just training the customer admins. So I remember I had one admin at a project. I was sitting there, I walked past him and he was doing something with AppScript all on his own. I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm building my ServiceNow integration so that all of my users have the button on the side panel. I was like, oh, great. Awesome. But it's definitely, I think, from an AppScript side, because it's citizen developer centric, it is a little bit more difficult until you start getting into the larger projects that have workspace centered around it. So whether those large integrated sheets, those types of things.
I think it's a great topic. I see on one side you have, admins and people that are trying to do this rollout, and they're like, less coded projects would be good. On the other hand, you see folks like, I'd really like to have the same solutions I had before. I'd like to have that. And so you brought up the citizen developer name. We see that a lot. Like, folks discover these things, they find these things, they fumble over things, and they go, I got it so far and I can't get any further. And then sometimes the IT folk are like, whoa, but we can't support this any further either, which hopefully sometimes is a phone call to you guys saying, hey, how do we build this? But Kevin, this is probably for you. How do you, A, build that confidence, and B, how do you help put that solution in place, but then help the customer make sure they can support it going further? And who does support that? Is that the citizen developer? Like, where does it fall in? Where do some of these projects end up, I guess, is the question I'm asking.
Yeah, so it can go two ways. Sometimes it turns into a very large implementation or project, and then we could look at support model from SADA, and then sometimes it's I don't know, an admin assistant or anyone who just knows what they want to see, but they don't have it available yet. So they say, I have this great tool. They go in, and like you said, they get so far, they come to us, and we're able to kind of polish it, finish it off, and then from there. A lot of times I've seen with citizen developers, they like owning that kind of tool, or
Right.
kind of sense of pride as well of, I created this, if it's useful for yourself, and then someone else on the team starts using it, it really catches on. I think a lot of people kind of embrace that. And then from a support standpoint, it can be hard sometimes. I mean, trying to find internal capacity to support projects for sure. Like if you're talking about citizen development, within SADA. But we, at least on our team, try to make ourselves available when we can to kind of talk through those things, whether it's just at a thought level, how to think through like the basic architecture, or what drop down to click, or what thing to select in AppSheet, And I guess I will say we're kind of really lucky at SADA. We have some people, obviously, the really gifted people on our team, given the industry we're in general, but just real great people. And we have some really good, who I would even say citizen developers on our team. The guy who runs our SE team, for example, is always building like AppSheet, I don't know, crazy stuff all the time, has no development experience, sorry, Chris, but, no dev experience,
apps.
but builds the coolest things, and he doesn't need support from me anymore, maybe the first few, but he's just really embraced it. And so things like that, it's really cool to see kind of that grow.
Do you see a snowball effect? Because when I think of VB script, I wouldn't touch it. Just because it feels like the entry level is higher, whereas with something like AppScript, I just open a browser and I can just start recording a macro and tweak it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Even things like, to get a little technical, right? So Google released the new IDE. I don't remember what it was, maybe a couple months ago, when we started going to like V8, full V8 engine, and you have the autocomplete in there, which is, I mean, before you could use like Clasp, local package manager, download like a Visual Studio extension that someone built and hope that it has all the stuff in there. But now you have that. So like, okay, everything I do with Drive is going to start with Drive app or Drive service, something like that. And then I can see the options from there. And it really makes it easy for people to just pick up on that and to really, just go somewhere with it. And yeah, they get stuck every now and then, but it's sort of teach someone how to write an if statement, and they can write 20 of them, once they know how to do one. So it's real great.
So first of all, good plug for Keith and his team that released those. That was one of the design goals, was to make it simpler. So that's awesome. Let me ask you that, because you mentioned you have talented folks. You mentioned you have a bench of folks that have these skills and capabilities. Obviously workspace developers aren't born, they're made. How do you, first of all, what do you find folks that do this? Or if finding folks is not the right way, how do you make folks? Like, what skill sets do you look for? And how do you get them there? What are some of the trappings that you guys use to make these folks, kind of top class?
Sure. And definitely development experience, first of all, of course, at least to maybe not AppScript, because that can be hard, but something like JavaScript, very similar languages, even Python, or really just, exposure to a programming language and the desire to learn more. People who can really, at least in our practice, who can kind of step out of their comfort zone and try things and fail, and it's just part of development, just things don't go right the first time. Yep. Most of the time, really, being able to do that kind of self-learn. And I think an understanding of workspace is extremely important. Like Kelly, correct me if different feelings, but just being able to know like what it's like living in the workspace solution or ecosystem. And then when someone comes to you and says, I have X problem, you live in that ecosystem as well. The pain points, you know how to approach that. So I'd say exposure to workspace, a little dev experience, and then, just attention to detail, things like that.
So
I was just going to say, you also find hidden gems. So Kevin and two of our other engineers came on all at the same time. And I think all three of you had some form of PowerShell experience. And I was like, this is great for a deployment engineer. And all three of them will always pop in sometimes and be like, I wrote this app script over here. I think Cody was the one that wrote a script to basically take our group's intake and reformat it so that we could plug it into GAM and provision all of the customers' groups. And he was like, this just made my life easier. And we're like, great, awesome. So you find hidden gems, especially as you're looking for deployment engineers as well. So
absolutely. So, but I understand you. I'm sorry, Martin.
Well, yeah, I was just going to comment. I see that quite often when we talk to Google Workspace developers. It is that fundamental knowledge of the product, because quite often when they're looking at doing stuff through the API, if they know it exists in the physical interface, they can work that backwards and start going through the documentation and working out how to do it.
And also, I think coming back to translating if you actually do need to custom dev it or not, or if somebody came to you with a problem and you said, oh, you can actually just do that if you enable this button over here, because there's so much of the development work already built into the platform.
So obviously you are a large Google-centric partner. You obviously have a lot of momentum around cloud as well too. I understand you have an offering that you use to help customers on board, and obviously probably use internally too. SADA University. First of all, is there a workspace element of SADA U? And if not, when do we expect that? But can one of you tell us more about how you're enabling customers to learn more and what it looks like? What's the program?
Yeah, so I can touch on the SADA U side, and I'll let Kevin talk about enabling our customers. So from the SADA U side, that's actually an onboarding program for internal employees. So we're helping, we're interviewing and bringing on, I believe it's 4 to 6 college grads, training them up on various Google Cloud technology stacks. And they go through a rigorous 12-week I think it's 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the program. They and they always come out with a project. Now, I can already hear Tony's ears because he asked me about the Workspace SADA U a couple quarters ago, and starting to really work on the idea of maybe not Workspace specifically, but Workspace dev, and what would that look like? It's a little bit of an easier, less barrier to entry in terms of bringing on new to the workforce employees. So.
Well, I think first of all, I think it'd be great to have assets like that. A couple of things. First of all, Workspace development. People go, citizen development, that must be easy. You can learn that in a weekend? And it's not the case. There's a lot that goes into it, right? First, learn the product. Second, you better have a programming background. Third, you have to understand the idiosyncrasies. We're also seeing a lot of large customers coming to us and saying, we've been on Workspace for a year, 2 years. We were leery at first of citizen developer. We didn't want that. But now we have this backlog of solutions, or we kind of trust it better now. We want people to learn. And so we're getting asks now for training, right? They want us to embed with them. We're like, whoa, we don't have the resources to do it easier. Kevin, how do you actually transition? I used to be a consultant. One of the hardest things is transition off a project so they stop calling you. How do you get that knowledge switch so they can fly by themselves and you can disembark?
Sure. So obviously training is extremely important at the end of the project, but I think during the project, we also make sure to involve the customer in what's going on and kind of also why we're doing it. I feel like that helps them understand, maybe they don't know, of course, the code that we're writing exactly, but they know the elements that are involved, why we've made the design decisions to a certain point. And then kind of, constantly educating them on what's going on. And then when we get to the end of it, we really all have a complete understanding of the solution. And then, of course, documentation, things like that. Throughout the project, we're constantly building out documentation, aiming towards, some sort of definition of done or finishing a requirement stock, things like that. So yeah, and then also being open to answer questions throughout the project. I know as developers sometimes, at least me personally, I don't always want to answer those some questions. I just want to build the solution and have fun. But I think kind of just putting yourself in their shoes and being willing to take the extra couple minutes, on the phone calls or answering that email that is maybe so basic, but it just gets them involved and kind of gets their buy-in and whatnot on it.
Well, it's funny. I think, most consultants realize that the mark of success is when the customers stop calling you.
Right.
They are satisfied, sufficient, and on their own. You just hope they call and they have new ideas. Hey, I want to ask that. I obviously you mentioned, you've got these great training resources. You're hiring. You've got a bunch of folks. You're growing fast. You're over 500 people now. You're global. You are not just in big cities in the U.S. like San Fran and New York and Chicago, and obviously headquartered in Hollywood, L.A. You're in Toronto. You're in Armenia. You're global. Are you guys hiring? What are you looking for? What can somebody do if they're curious? Hey, how can I join the SADA team?
Ooh, exciting. So I know selfishly, I'm going to start with Workspace. From the Workspace side, I don't know who's watching, but I think we're hiring on every single position across our Workspace practice. So right now it is deployment engineers. Kevin has changed teams, so I will be looking to fill him back in at some point. And then we've got sales engineers open. So if you're more so want to do the sales side rather than the delivery side, we have change management and adoption roles if you're looking for that. We do have some very good change managers that also dive into the app script side and the developer side, talking about those transformation labs. And then we're also hiring project managers. And then across the entirety, I know the Armenia team is hiring a ton of people as well, very focused on Google Cloud. And then our Google Cloud team in general is just always hiring. There's an army. I think the Inframod team is now 100 people strong just for that pillar. Wow. So awesome. I'm sure they would love some more people.
No, and if folks aren't really familiar with SADA, like I know you annually win partner awards from Google, and you've always been growing, and you've been there at so many key customers, and so that's why it's obviously an amazing organization. A question for you, flip it around for a second. If I was a customer and I was curious, how do I pick Kevin's brain? How do I sign up to your team for services or to learn things? What's the best way to approach you?
So I think Martin has a link, so I'm going to cue Martin on the link there. So that might actually, and Veronica, I might have messed up that link for you. I'm sorry. There is a contact us link that Martin will send out there. So they'll get you connected with someone on, it will be more so the sales side as well. They'll make sure to get you right into the right direction. So if you are looking for workspace or development work, they'll get you right over to us.
Awesome. Well, that makes good sense. So what I'd love to do with a little bit of time here is kind of peel back the covers a little on what do you build? What does it look like? What are typical projects? Now, I know every single custom project is a different project, and that's the beauty of it. But, Kevin, I know you've done some really big projects for some large customers that have had some pretty phenomenal impact. And I'm not sure what you can share publicly because obviously there's confidentiality and privacy, respectful to that. But give us an idea of what are some of the use cases? What are some of the problems you solve? What's the scope of some of these projects?
Yeah, so one of the really fun things about SADA is we'll take on really anything that's workspace related that has development. We'll knock it out. Really no problem. But we get the opportunity to work on, small scripts. And like you said, we've built some really big projects. So I guess just talking about the product specifically, not necessarily the customer, sure. But we built for example, a time and attendance and payroll system for a customer. That was a huge, I don't know if you remember how long it was, Kelly, but say 12-month year-long project. Maybe it felt like 3, but took about a year. But they wanted their their employees to be able to use Google Sheets to enter their time. And then from there, we built a web app interface for payroll to interact with so they could see who submitted their timesheets, a manager approval system. I mean, a full-on application all built with AppScript natively and plugged it all into just Google Workspace. Real neat. So if you're at this company and you get paid hourly, I mean, you use AppScript every day to get paid, you know. And we've built some other, I mean, I say huge, but really big applications. Recently finished a financial reporting tool that did have BigQuery in it as well. So a little GCP in the mix. But we do like to kind of follow a similar framework sometimes of building applications. So we'll start with building an API so we can consume it, whether it's through Sheets, through Drive, whatever. Generally a web app interface. So, you know, the buttons, configurations, things like that. And then if there's another component involved, so like the Sheets aspect or Drive or Gmail or whatever, you know, in that way we have the API, we can just consume it from any Google service, you know, and just kind of have a full system. And we've done some other things too. I don't know if we want to go outside of just AppScript. I kind of think
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that the folks don't realize, like I said, in your full service, right? You do our entire stack. Mm-hmm. You know, not every project has a start and end in Workspace, right? It can be a component, it can be a UI, it can be a staging thing, it can be a prototype tool. I mean, it's a Swiss Army knife, and sometimes the blade is too small, right? It's not the right tool to use. And so I'd love to hear that. Before you say that, I'd also like to hear, and this may sound like a funny question, but when is a project too small to engage SADA? Like what would you not consider worthy? Because let's be honest, I mean, you know, to put engineering time and resources and support, you're like, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to, you know, to write something small. Is there a sweet spot type of applications? I'm impressed you did a payroll system, but I'm sure if someone's like, hey, we want a button that formats this sheet, you're gonna be like, really? Are you really asking us that? So where's the sweet spot for that for projects?
I don't know if you want to take that from an official standpoint, Kelly. I was just saying, some really small
I'm thinking about some of the small support ones that we've done. But I think generally most of them are around, I would say about 10,000 or above. But we do also, you know, if we want to look into with customers, we're always flexible. If you,
sure, absolutely.
If someone were to come to us and say, hey, I want to build a button here, we're more going to dive into the why are you unable to create that button? And can we offer you a couple of AppScript trainings instead? And that will enable you. So we do really, I know Kevin, you guys touched on it earlier, where we really live and breathe being able to enable our customers on it, because we want to make sure that, you know, from a feeling of being able to rely on yourself, that's a nice feeling as an admin as well. And not having to call Kevin, and Kevin's moved on to 3 other projects. So that's kind of where, you know, we're going to dive a little deeper into that ask. So something small like that, it might be, hey, maybe this admin is getting that question from 5 different departments to build all this stuff. Let's put together just a training plan rather than building that out.
Well, I also imagine, first of all, you are full service, right? You're not development something you do, but you're way more than that, right? You're everything from the migration to the transformation to, you know, user capabilities and stuff. So sometimes development's kind of probably sprinkled in where necessary. Then, like I said, you're also building payroll systems as well too, which is, again, super neat that you have that capability, that opportunity. So that's why I was just curious, because a lot of folks I talk to, and sometimes they're small or medium businesses, they don't know, can we be a part of this? Is it actually feasible to do this, to find outside help and to get it done? Because, you know, like I said, with workspace development, sure, you can learn it, but it's way better to turn to somebody like, you know, Kevin and his team, where you go, well, they've been doing this for years. They actually can do it in a weekend, where it would, you know, take me multiple months to get it done. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. A question for you, Kevin. So with Google Workspace on the development side, we do see, you know, the product continues to evolve in terms of services. So, we've had Anu on talking about document AI. We had Christian Schock talking about Forms API. And kind of related to, at the start of the show, Charles was kind of highlighting some of the places where we can get updates and information. For you, are there places you go to find out about this stuff, or is SADA in a position where Google is basically contacting you and saying, nudge, nudge, there's a Form API coming along. Do you want to have a little test beforehand?
A little bit of both, I guess, if I can say. We do like to, try to lead the industry, get our hands on things early. So we have a really solid relationship there on some items. I'm blanking on the blog. I know I have it in my bookmark somewhere. Probably should have looked ahead of time, but there's development updates, I know, or someone's doing development updates on the Google side. That has been really helpful. And then aside from that, which isn't the best way, but I'm constantly in the docs. And I think Google does a great job of announcing ahead of time when something's going to be deprecated or changed. I mean, gosh, I feel like we get a year sometimes to redo the code and everything, and if you haven't looked at the Sheets API docs in a year, then you're probably not developing much actively, so kind of get it through osmosis sometimes. But I would say a mix of all the above.
And Kevin, you were starting to talk about expanding the scope. Like I said, I know your role is broader than just Workspace now. Where do you see Workspace dabbling in currently, but also in your future world? Like where do you see it touching the edges of other technologies, and what are some of those technologies?
Gosh, yeah. So honestly, you can touch Workspace from almost any like GCP or other infra cloud entry point. To give an example, so something in my new role that I've been working on the past week is actually building a chatbot for someone, but more so a chat platform or system, which I'll just plug this in case any chat devs at Google watch this, but the ability to create a chat room through the API and manipulate user membership would be so amazing. I would love if that would be added. Just throw that out there.
It's on the roadmap.
I love it. Maybe I should read the roadmap. I don't know if I've seen it, but
no, I don't even know if it's publicly on the roadmap.
Hey, but that's going to open up so much opportunity for the API. But anyways, they wanted, hey, we have these internal employees. They want support. We have like 10 support people. How can we make this work? So long story short, building an interface where the user can direct message the bot. It goes through dialog flow. So we're hitting GCP. We get that context awareness so they can say, hey, I need a human. That would then get connected basically directly to a space. And then we sort of built a middleware so they can use things like / commands. In a DM, you can directly talk to the bot, but they can talk and then goes through to this queue of support agents who can either be busy, idle, but integrating it right in chat. And it just came from their GCP customer and using actually dialog flow and, pitch the idea, and now everyone's getting their support via Workspace, right? Through chat.
Let me ask this question selfishly, so folks in my world listening in may get some interest. There's a lot of talk about where Workspace is as a business productivity tool, and kind of has its little niche over here. But for driving and pushing workloads for GCP, that's over here and separate. How often do you see workload actually in opportunities and consumption actually driven from the Workspace side? Like you said, someone wants to have a chat UI to do something, or someone wants to store data somewhere because it's in Workspace. Do you see Workspace drive opportunities back into GCP?
Yeah, I would say I'm not directly involved in the sales cycle there, but
Sure.
from like a technical and dev standpoint, data warehousing comes into play a lot. Hey, we have this in a big sheet or Excel at the time, or whatever. We can look. You have BigQuery, you have Cloud Store, whatever spanner application, insert name, and of course the opportunity to move them to that platform and then grow with it. You can do so much more with BigQuery than you can with a sheet,
Right.
depending on your use case. But I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Kelly.
I was just going to say, especially with connected sheets and building in BigQuery there, we're seeing a lot of drive around that. And I mean, we do generally see, I think we've started pulling the numbers as well, just in terms of customers, whether they have GCP or Workspace or both through SADA. But looking at the numbers of like, do they have Workspace? And it's a fair number of like probably a majority of customers that have both Workspace and GCP, and they work so seamlessly together. And, you know, even everything from, you know, being able to build in your policies for IAM and your, I'm butchering this, but your one of the questions we've gotten recently is about your app script folder. So each person that relates to GCP and all of those policies there. So where that folder structure lies, who can actually create app scripts. So it melds really closely together.
Yeah. Another question I have, and Kevin, maybe back to you. You mentioned chatbot. By the way, I'd love to see that. I think it's a super cool idea. What are some of the other kind of preferred ways you deploy, like the project types? I mean, I'm sure some are just, you know, code behind a worksheet, but do you see add-ons? Do you see, you know, maybe internally deployed add-ons at some of your customers? Like, what is the most common ways, or some of the common ways you actually deploy solutions on Workspace?
Sure. I would say add-ons less frequently, at least at SADA. We built some for internal consumption, but I haven't really seen that externally. We write a lot of container-bound scripts, you know, so doc sheets, slides, forms, especially, I think you mentioned, Martin, the Forms API, you know, things like that. So yeah, really.
I have a question for you. You don't just serve other customers, you serve yourselves, right? Obviously, you build things. Is there a tool or a solution or something internally that somebody built that is like SADA wide internally in use?
Yeah, so we have we have a signature generator that one of our technical account managers put together. At least I'm going to give him credit for it. I think he did. And then he actually, same person, really gifted person, but he also put together a chat. Actually, you guys in the beginning, I think, plugged in the beginning of the show, but a chat bot. There's a really great article, I think you helped with, Charles, that goes over an update. And we have our own version of SADA that has been amazing. You know, the whole team can get those instant updates when they're posted from Google. And then, since it's in a space, we can comment on it. So if it's, hey, this is a great update, or hey, this falls short of what we expected, whatever. But
yeah, I mean, I think
Mike wants his shout out about his highlight duplicates add-on.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I love. I mean, you know, obviously Google is a team of engineers internally. You guys have lots of engineers, and so these things pop up because people are comfortable, familiar, and like I said, there aren't always the tools available or the budgets to do it. So you write it yourself. And we had Eric Kalita on a show a couple of weeks ago, and you know, Eric was famous for creating all these scripts that would, pardon the term, go viral because people are like, oh, we're going to use that, we're going to use that, we're going to use that, and just because, you know, it's easy and it flows. That's why I do love it. It is accessible. It can grow into a bigger solution. You can report it into a different platform if necessary. But, you know, Workspace, you build something quickly, it's up and running. There's less obstacles. You know, I was thinking to myself a second ago when you were talking about the payroll solution, you know, one of the things that's really kind of unique about Workspace development, it doesn't require a credit card. It doesn't require you to worry about, you know, throttling costs. It runs for free on the back end. And so kind of like, there are some virtues of it to actually use it for things that make sense, especially prototyping, especially small businesses. And so that's why I always like tell people this is, you know, it's a best kept secret. You know, share it loudly.
Something we've talked occasionally about on the show is Google Sheets and the occasional butchering of Google Sheets to perhaps turn it into a database when it shouldn't really be a database. Is that something you encounter quite often? Do you have any nightmare sheet stories?
Yes, we do run into that frequently, especially a lot of times people ingesting data that was in Excel, you know, and trying to get over. I think, I don't know if I've been around long enough, but there's some archaic or some old thought that spreadsheets make good databases. Kelly, you want to comment on that?
Oh, I was going to say that's probably actually the use case for why you wrote our migration reporting connector. So we would, the first iteration of it was hey, like we need to have all of the migration statistics for this mail migration of our go live weekend, ready to go in a spreadsheet. The customers always ask for it. So the first iteration of it was we're pulling it directly into the spreadsheet. But Kevin, as the Data Studio connector came out, started just plugging it directly as part of a Data Studio connector filterable list. No more giant spreadsheets.
I was able to automate everything. It was nice.
You both mentioned in passing a couple times AppSheet. AppSheet is geared towards the system developer. It is primarily a no-code solution, although there is ways now to hook into AppScript. Where's that sitting in the business? Are customers asking for it? Are you using it for applications? What's the story behind your AppSheet exposure?
I'm gonna let Kevin answer that.
So we actually had a really big AppSheet from a customer standpoint project that I know outside of the citizen developer, but I mean, if you're a customer of this company, you're using AppSheet, you're being exposed to it just as a customer. We built a handful of applications, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of internal tools, or I say a handful of internal tools. Like I know Chris has built some internally here, some other team member as well. So yeah, I would say just from a traction standpoint, yeah, we definitely see it picking up traction. Being something that people want. It's easy.
One of my curiosities around is, is there a kind of an aftermarket consulting business for it? Will people actually, do they see it as a tool that, sure, I could figure this out, but what if I could just turn to somebody like SADA and have a solution, sent back to me that was perfect and I didn't have to think about it? So I was just curious if there was any uptake there.
I was just saying it's definitely something we have done, and do even on a small scale. If it's, hey, we've started this, we can't finish it, we could do that, or from ground up, both.
Hey, one of the things that's I mentioned at the top of the show that really great podcast called the Google Workspace Recap Podcast. I know you're a great organization for sharing community information. You're at all of our big events. You're known for tremendous parties, by the way. You're thought leaders in so many ways. You've got, many folks that are so well respected in it. You also have a show. I believe it's called 27 Degrees. I'd love to know where that name comes from as well, too. But that's a way to stay in touch of what folks at SADA are doing, or how SADA sees the world. And is there anything you can add to that, or you want to do a shout out to that program and let folks know what they could expect by checking that out?
Can I say big fan of Ryan? Sorry, Troy.
Oh, Troy's awesome too. So I believe it's every fortnight, and Martin, keep me honest here, that's every 2 weeks. They're doing just as much like talking through the workspace updates, but also as we move towards this ongoing adoption and ongoing transformation, they're also bringing in customers. So you're getting live customer stories. Like I think one of the stories on there was with WeWork and how they moved and changed all of their off of Zoom to Meet, and how they worked through the Meet hardware side of that. So really talking about a lot of the ongoing adoption, a lot of the new and upcoming updates, and shout out to Rowan's LinkedIn posts. I also use those to reference sometimes if I'm like, hey, I need a quick recap and the weekly recap for the updates hasn't come out yet. I go to Rowan's LinkedIn.
I love the recap of Next that they did, and the blog post where it was like one line for each feature release or whatever. That was awesome. Yeah. So like I said, I super appreciate it. I mean, there's tons of places to find information, but it's great.
I just also there was a great episode on public sector stuff. So I think it's probably worth mentioning that SADA it's not just enterprise. So it
can be core
EDU,
Gov, PubSec. And our PubSec customers actually, there's a case study out there as well for the virtual assistant scheduling tool that was used, I think, by a Department of Transportation to schedule DMV appointments and use it virtually so they would set up a meet. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Hey, we're pretty close to time. I always like to ask a question in passing. I know it's somewhat loaded, and if you've watched the show, you should definitely expect this question.
This is the test.
This is a little bit. What would you like to see from Google? Like, what's the one thing you'd like or would change or would ask for? Keeping that specifically around workspace development. Anybody have something you're like, wow, I really wish you would do this? If the answer is nothing, that's perfect. But
oh no, there's so much.
I know, Kelly, like I got 38 right now.
I think Kevin gave his with the extending the chat API.
The chat, yeah.
And you already got your wish, but you can have one more.
I'll take the URL fetch. If I could get that limit increased, I understand why it would be where it is, but some sort of even like moving to a standard GCP project, if you could like request a quota increase on that, you could just open up the door to building so much more, mainly thinking data studio, but just because you need to pull big data sets. But I feel like that would really open things up to allow that, yeah.
I'll throw one more out there. We are all about collaboration inside of Workspace. And I know one of the hardest watch points if we are taking on larger dev projects has been being able to have two developers work on the same script at the same time.
You know, Charles, I think that's the second time that's come up.
That's more than the second.
Just bringing it back on a few more times. I'll just repeat that as well.
No, you're absolutely right. I know that's one of the things the team is trying to figure out is how to do better team dev. And Kevin, like I said, I know we're kind of at time, but I love to hear how do you do those larger scale projects without obviously going crazy. Because we know Workspace is not perfect for source control and the team environment, and so a lot of Kim just chimed in that she agrees with you, Kelly, and so in the comments, and so
the three of us had some fun weekends as we were all like, did everyone just close out, just close the screens?
Yeah. That said, do a lot of folks use things like Clasp to try to get away from that? Kevin, I know you mentioned the new editor is great, but sometimes you want your own environment or to manage the code differently.
Yeah, talking to people, yes, I see it a lot. I will be completely honest with you. I use the IDE now more than Clasp personally.
Yeah.
I just I'm a big fan of it personally. I don't know, it works great for me. It's gray if I haven't used it. It's not if I've variables and stuff. Just it works wonderful.
Yeah. It's definitely an improvement. I've heard a lot of people they're less reliant on Clasp. Obviously, things they want are better deployment features in the new version. They want better library functionality. They want better collaborative features. And some of those projects are underway, but as you know, AppScript is a small but steady team, and so we don't get things rapidly. I mean, this was a big year getting V8 and the IDE in the same year. But we hope to see more with it. I mean, the great thing is it's growing. It's exciting. It's great when you have a problem that too many people want to develop at the same time on the same project. So it's a good problem. But.
Right. And and to your point, we're always happy to chat with you, come back and chat with you or find another medium, whatever, to go through, some more technical deep dives.
Absolutely. Look forward to that.
All sorts of, tricks that we have or just to kind of get people thinking, different ways to use AppScript. But yeah, we got a ton of it. We built some cool stuff.
Awesome.
I think we got a follow-up show then. Brilliant.
Sounds good.
Well, I know we've had some people in the chat as well. Also, plus oneing the co-op, so take a note, Charles. But I think we're at time. It's been fascinating hearing about what SADA does and some of the your individual roles within SADA. Thanks for those that have tuned in for this. The recording will go up straight away, and also we'll include lots of links for all the things that we've mentioned as part of the show. Is there anything you think, Kelly, we missed in terms of things? I think we were quite comprehensive in terms of bookmarking stuff.
Yeah, I think you got everything. Sorry for not catching that one link.
No problem. We got it.
I know folks can find you. You guys are pretty well known in the industry, and you're a great leading partner. So again, thanks for your time.
I'll say shout out to Kim who commented. She's one of our rock star developers here at SADA on the team. So
Mike Muffin is watching as well. He was chatting me on the side.
Mike's great as well. I can't shout out everyone, but Kim has got me through on the dev side many times. Has been my right hand on a lot of cool stuff. So
This is starting to feel like the Oscars.
yeah, right. Play the music.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, folks, that is us. We will no doubt see you all next week, same time. Well, it won't be the same time. I think we finally converge on the same
We
time
do
zone.
converge. I think we're still putting up a show for next week. I don't think we've got that done yet. I know in 2 weeks we've got chatbots with one of our chatbot PMs, but next week I think we're trying to find a topic that fits in neatly in between. So stay tuned for that. We will be back in our regular place.
In the meantime, folks, happy scripting.
Thanks.